All right. Let's have a look here. Okay, I think we're live. Yes, we are. All right. Guys, thanks very much for joining us today. Whoever's here live, who is watching us later, we've got a good little show for you again. We've got two for you in the space of just a few hours, so nice little treat. I've got two people that I've been meaning to speak to for a while now. And so I've got Craig and I've got Fiorella from the Convo Couch. Guys, first of all, welcome to the show and thanks for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for having us on. This is awesome. We've been wanting to talk to you for a while. I know Pasta has, but
yeah, you've become a household name in our house here in Pasadena, California. I keep saying Sharma, and then we go out and get some shawarma. So
there you go.
It works beautifully.
See, it's like a reminding loop, right?
Yeah.
We love your work, man. We really do. We first saw you on Nico's show, our brother station, excuse me. And it was just amazing. And it's just been so crazy because during this election cycle, like I told you, when we talk back and forth, having to learn about Indian politics out of the blue has been like surprising to a lot of us. So we just look forward to getting educated and actually educating some people in India about some of our candidates here.
Yeah, for sure. Because it's been a bit of an interesting series of developments in the past few months where I don't know if this is going to be a major part of it, but in some way at least, sort of India has inserted itself into the American political equation. So we'll get to that in a second. But why don't you guys give us whoever's watching right now, give us a little bit of a background about yourselves and the Convo Couch.
Okay, well, I came to Los Angeles for acting and writing, and basically, I met Pasta working in a restaurant, and we were Bernie supporters. We got involved in the Bernie campaign in 2015. We were Bernie volunteers. It ignited a lot of political questions in me, just living in Los Angeles and seeing the poverty in comparison to the wealth that is side by side here. And things have only gotten worse since 2015 in Los Angeles. We have the most corrupt probably of the states, neoliberals, centrists, which are, the pro-war neocons that want to wage war everywhere, controlling our state. And they are the most powerful and they are the wealthiest here. And so it's been pretty much a constant uphill battle against not only the people on our state, but also nationally, fighting the smears and misinformation, the corporate media like CNN, MSNBC, and also like the right, Fox News, all of these combined are just terrible. And so we saw the need for independent media to rise, and we saw the need for us to have a no strings attached show where we listen to what people want. We also give the information out with as little bias as possible. And we are also community involved in our community. We are involved in what goes on. I consider myself an activist and a community organizer as well in my own community, which also impacts the things we talk about in a different way than a lot of these people who just get paid millions of dollars to lie. Right. So.
It was like a responsibility, Sham. We just didn't see people out there covering our candidates, marching in our marches, on the streets. So we felt the need. We thought it was a responsibility. And in fact, I kind of quote Chris Hedges all the time about, he's talking about, independent media and all these people squeaking against an avalanche, which is the mainstream media and the establishment and the deep state and everything we have coming over here. But squeak we must. So I found Fiorella. We were working in a restaurant. And I said, "You want to go squeak?" And, I was a restaurant manager for the last 5 years. I was a corporate restaurant manager.
Oh, wow.
So for the last 5 years, I'd finally started making that good salary, getting my health insurance. I'd finally reached where I wanted to be in the business. I had an awesome job. It was called corporate training manager, where I would go from restaurant to restaurant to restaurant to restaurant, opening up, doing all the training. It was really just a great job. But then I met Fiorella at one of those restaurants, and less than a year later, and it was actually 2 years ago yesterday, we started the Convo Couch. And once again, it was just, we felt it was our duty to do this. I never thought, me personally, I have very little college and stuff, but I would never thought I'd be calling myself a journalist, a commentator, a moderator, but we thrust ourselves into it. And it's been one big snowball getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We're at 27,000 subscribers.
Right.
We're able to moderate debates, and we've even been able to have great candidates like Tulsi Gabbard come down here and interview with us. So it was a responsibility that just kept going. And, yesterday we were giving each other praises and what we built, and it's pretty awesome. But it is kind of, it's a struggle. It's a sad story, kind of going up these forces that are fighting against us.
Yeah, that's the interesting part. That's something I didn't know. And that's something I wonder how many people who are not American realize when they first come into, or when they first start sort of reading about the American political scene. For someone who's not from America, for instance, the American political seems to be binary. There's, you have the liberals and then you have the conservatives, and that's about it. And they're fighting, and that's all there is to the story. But one of the things that I started to realize is that there are like different ideological groups within the quote unquote liberal movement as well. You have what you were referring to, Fiorella, as neocons, and then you have the progressives. And has that always been there, or is that sort of a new development? Because I feel like I heard more about it when I first sort of got to reading about Bernie Sanders and his campaign. That's when I really started to hear about the progressives that are apparently different from the neoliberals or the pure liberals or whatever you'd like to call them.
It's always been there, but the thing is, Bernie Sanders kind of reemerged that whole movement that failed, so to speak, from the Vietnam War, from having the hippie love revolution of the 1960s, and it kind of has reemerged. Bernie Sanders ignited what was already there, but people felt like they were alone. People felt like they didn't really have very much faith in the system. With the emergence of Bernie Sanders in 2015, and how far he got, and then subsequently what happened when the election was rigged, and it was, the primary was rigged against him for Hillary Clinton, right? When after all that happened, people were like, holy crap, our system is functioning as it should, right? It's rigged in a sense, but in another sense, it's functioning exactly as it was set to function. People here don't vote because precisely they feel like their vote doesn't matter. We have one of the lowest voter turnouts of any nation. We are the richest nation in the world, but yet we have more and more poverty each and every day, with the bottom half of the country being unable to afford any sort of emergency. Yet we have the most billionaires of the world, and people have sort of come to terms with that, and they're like, wow, maybe this is the time to do something, because also with the whole climate change, people don't feel like there's enough time. This is it. And so what Bernie Sanders did was he pushed that idea, like, hey, it's all of us. There's a lot of people that need to go out there and fight for the truth, basically, for the truth, regardless of the binary, partisans that you're talking about, because the binary whole binary ideology is what has fomented the state we're in now. It's fomented the right versus the left. Things are not like that. Issues are complex. There's nuance. Things are gray. They're not black and white. And so I think more and more people are beginning to question that. And as we go into 2020, I think this election is going to be more about the class revolution and about pro-war and pro-peace. Who really wants to have peace and who really wants to go to war?
Yeah, and I think too, what she's saying is along with the suffering, that it just hit such a high point. When we talk about the homelessness in America, we got 600,000 people on the street. And I know your country's no stranger to homelessness and what you guys are going on and experiencing there. But I think the timing of the information age had a lot to do with it as well too. Can you imagine Barack Obama trying to run today in this group and stuff? Right. Everything that he's done, it's all over the internet, and that was really big when it came to Hillary Clinton, that all her sins were posted from this army of people who had retreated to the internet with independent media and everything. And then it also was able to lift Bernie Sanders up, because people were able to dig up his speeches from years ago, 20, 30 years ago, and the consistency of this man fighting for the poor, and really bring that to light. I mean, it could have happened with Dennis Kucinich, who I was a big guy who ran with in 2008, but in 2008, the information age wasn't there. So I think a lot of fact that the internet has just grown big, and everybody's speech, everything they say is now full front and center. Just the other day, a guy by the name of Matt Orfalia, who got hired from the Bernie campaign because one of his videos went viral, and he had videos that went viral.
Right, I remember that. Yeah.
They were able to dig up something from him 10 years ago when he was 19 years old, and they end up firing him, not taking him on the campaign because nothing's hidden anymore. So I think a lot of the neoliberals, you can't hide their stuff anymore. You know, in 2008, it was between Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Stewart, right? Those are three neoliberals right there. John Edwards, excuse me. Those are three neoliberals. So the progressives really didn't have the information out there on these people like they do today.
So let me ask you this. Let's get a couple of definitions cleared up. How do you define what a neoliberal is in the American sense?
So in the American sense, someone that has increased the type of political maneuverings that Ronald Reagan had. So Ronald Reagan, from that time on, Bill Clinton, also Barack Obama, what they do is they push a capitalist agenda that is embedded in the sort of theory that trickle-down economics works, that we're going to invest in corporations, we're going to deregulate any sort of regulation that these corporations should have. We're going to treat them as people, citizens united. We are going to go and give Wall Street all of the money because we think that that's going to translate into giving money to the middle class and the working class, which is entirely false. So they deregulated Wall Street. They let the banks do whatever the hell they wanted, give out these loans to people. And then we had the Wall Street crash. Neoliberalism is the ideology that puts capitalism in an unfettered way. It creates an oligarchy as to how it stands because the corporations are treated as people. They're giving more power than people. And there's no regulation. And so they believe that this is a free market, when in reality, the market isn't free at all, because these people control so much that small businesses can't even compete. And so what we're seeing is that small businesses are going out of business now because they can't provide what they're supposed to provide. And all of that money is staying at the top 1%, and it's not trickling down. And that's the result of neoliberalism. Also, to point out, neoliberalism involves regime change wars that Tulsi talks about, right? It involves having these proxy wars where we go in for oil and we go in for money, but yet we say we're spreading democracy. That is quote, or putting humanitarian aid. That is American quote for imperialist regime change. And so all of these policies led to the election of Donald Trump, because Donald Trump campaigned as a non-interventionist guy that was going to be anti-establishment, this populist guy that was going to drain the swamp. It was false, but that's why he was able to get so many people to believe in him. And at the end of the day, the neocons and the neoliberals are pretty much one giant party that's pro-war and pro-corporations and pro-capitalism, that is completely unregulated, that is driving our economy down and putting all our money into the military-industrial complex, which completely ravages any sort of Medicare or healthcare or education for our people, because the less educated you are, the more likely you are to go into the military and go die for Richmond's wars, right? So
and like she said, a neoliberal is pretty much a neoconservative, because they're open for business. And as progressives, that's what we do. We follow the money. That's the quickest way to spot a neoliberal. Look who's funding them. Who is their employer? You know what I'm saying? And that's the quickest way to spot these neoliberals. And the neoliberals partake in the business of America, and it's a war economy. So therefore, they get funded by the military-industrial complex. They get funded by Big Pharma, who's pushing them not to have the Medicare for all. We follow the money, which is kind of a surprise right now going on in this country, is because Elizabeth Warren, if you follow the money, you see who's funding her. And yet there's still a faction of our liberals that are still pushing her as a progressive when she's clearly not.
Right. That's the interesting part, because, a lot of people, at least what I've seen in the media, a lot of people have been sort of equating somebody like Elizabeth Warren and Bernie as they're pretty much the same person, but Elizabeth Warren, she's more dynamic. That's what we're hearing. So who would the people that participated in the Democratic debates, who would you classify as a neoliberal in there?
I mean, I would classify everybody pretty much, except Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie Sanders. I would say Elizabeth Warren in the world scheme is probably a on the right, like technically. I mean, right in
She's
the world
right of
scheme.
center.
In the United States, because we're such a conservative country and we've gone so far right, she's considered left of center. I wouldn't say she's entirely like 100% neoliberal, but I would say that she pretty much will be. So here's the thing. She's campaigning like a progressive because she understands that there's this movement. She has latched onto Bernie Sanders. She is credited with these ideas of like the Consumer Protection Bureau, which was largely a front. A lot of my friends who were part of Occupy Wall Street know that it really didn't do anything to help consumers. And she is credited a lot going against big business and big banks. She gives great speeches, but again, you have to follow the money and look. When it comes to legislation, she has never actually put out legislation that is similar to what Bernie Sanders has put out. That is very, in a way, leftist, democratic, working people's movement, standing with unions, marching with unions. She has never really pushed for that. She thinks that the system can be fixed. Bernie Sanders thinks the system will, like, you need a new system. It's a very, very stark difference. The only people that are equating those two are people that want the progressive movement to quell and want us to accept the more of the same, right? Elizabeth Warren is pretty much like Obama in a lot of ways. I wouldn't say she's Hillary Clinton, because Hillary Clinton is far worse as far as her foreign policy. But Elizabeth Warren, for instance, is okay with bombing the Palestinian people, is very pro-Israel. She wants to invest in the military-industrial complex and call it green energy, like green militarism.
Biodiesel bombs.
She's part of the bipartisanship that focuses on the Trump derangement syndrome, which is like they're focused on Donald Trump. Donald Trump is bad, evil, boogeyman, but they don't focus on how to actually beat him and why people voted for him. She's part of more of the same. She may not be as bad as everybody else, but in a way that's worse, because it's causing people to be more accepting of it, to kind of give in. And all she's been doing is latching on to Bernie Sanders. But when you look at her money, her daughter worked with big insurance companies and she's taking money that way. She's taking money from big pharma, big insurance. She's a darling of the military industrial complex. Raytheon loves her. I mean, you have to look at these things. And so I think the only people that aren't neoliberals on that stage truly, truly are Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard. And it's really sad because, that's the state of our country.
And once again, we follow the money. Where do you get money from? Who you get it funded from? Tulsi Gabbard, Bernie Sanders don't take back money. And Elizabeth Warren is dancing around this idea, well, I'll take it in the primary, but then I'm going to take it in the general, or maybe I'll take it here, or on a Tuesday after 3, I might take it, but when it comes to 9 o'clock, I'll stop taking that money. And
it's a signal.
She's the biggest flip-flopper there. So, I mean, she's the one in question where people say that, is she progressive? No, she's still a neoliberal, because at the end of the day, if you trace back her money, especially whether she took her money from her Senate run and then she transferred over to her presidential run, you look at that money, where it comes from. There's a lot of nefarious actors there. So she is a neoliberal. And it really is a shame, too, when you talk about Tulsi Gabbard. She doesn't take any PAC money, but there's the questions about where she gets her money from the neoliberals who are attacking her, that where the money that she's taking from the individuals who it's connected to.
Right.
But and that's why I want to have you on the show next week, my show, to talk about it with the RSS members, where they're trying to get her to cut that funding off. You know what I'm saying? And it's a shame, but they are the only two progressives on that stage, and they are the only two who are really truly anti-war. Because even Elizabeth Warren can't even answer the question about pulling out a regime change. If it was up to them, Buttigieg and all these other guys, they would keep troops. And Biden said it plain and simple. I would provide AmeriCover because I'm the only guy who would do that. They'll keep the troops in Syria forever.
Yeah, that's what Buttigieg said as well. And I want to get to that as well in a second. It was interesting because I feel like one of the trends of this latest debate was a lot of people went after Warren, and that sort of I thought that was sort of indicative of Warren gaining ground over Biden, and it does appear, well, at least it appears that way if you follow the mainstream media, that Warren is going to get the nomination. That's they've been saying that for a few weeks now, that it's a lock-in for Warren, and she's got it in the bag, and Biden's done, and all of that stuff. Did you guys get that same feeling that that this is it? Warren's got it.
I hear
bag?
it, Sham.
Yeah.
she my partner is awesome when it comes to this stuff. She labeled the 3 threats right off the bat, and her number 1 threat was Elizabeth Warren. She also pointed out Buttigieg, and she also pointed out Kamala. But we know what happened to Kamala.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tulsi Gabbard, of course,
Kinda off the
annihilated
cliff.
Kamala. Thankfully for not just her, but for Bernie Sanders and the entire progressive movement. But here's the thing. Kamala Harris was the favored one. She was the one that had the meetings that Obama had. She was the one that they were trying to prop up because of her ethnicity, her gender, her being from California. When that didn't work, they went to Elizabeth Warren because it was a joke between they went to Joe Biden, and then they saw that Joe Biden it has too many skeletons in his closet. I mean, he's also not performing well. I don't know if he's mentally there. I'm not saying that to make fun of him. I'm just saying there are issues with him, right? And then they went to Elizabeth Warren because they're like, this is our last card. This is what we have, right? This is all we got. And Elizabeth Warren can trick these people into thinking she's progressive. And so we're going to prop her up. Elizabeth Warren is not progressive because she's being propped up by the centralist think tanks like Near Tanden's Third Way. These think tanks poured money into Elizabeth Warren and are pouring money more into this sort of ideology. And so it's clear the fix is in. When she's being propped up by the mainstream media, when she's being propped up by Third Way, when she's being propped up by a lot of the people that hate Bernie, but somehow love her, like Wall Street. Wall Street has said, well, we really don't like Bernie Sanders. But Elizabeth Warren isn't that bad. They're signaling, they're saying, okay, at least she's not that bad. We can work with that. The reason she was being attacked, yes, it's because she's in the lead, but also because it makes her look good. A lot of the attacks from Buttigieg where he was punching right made her look like the more progressive candidate. Yeah. And all she was doing was latching on to Bernie Sanders, saying the senator and I, Bernie Sanders and I, the entire time. But really, none of those ideas were hers. Medicare for all, that was not hers. The issue of student debt, that was not hers. I mean, she pretty much copied his entire platform, but puts it in a vague way so she can backtrack eventually and signal to other people. So this is it. Yes, you're right. The fix is in it. This is what the mainstream media is saying, that Elizabeth Warren's going to get the nomination. Elizabeth Warren is leading the polls. Just so you know, the polls are definitely manufactured. I don't want to use the word fake, but they're manufactured in a way. They're polling people via landlines, which the majority of millennials and a lot of people don't answer the phone. One, they think it's like a debt collector calling.
Yeah, I don't answer the phone when I see a number I don't recognize.
Yeah, I don't exactly. You're not going to answer that, so I don't answer. So I haven't been pulled. He's been pulled once.
My whole life just recently.
And so that's false. And then they use a small sample size. They only poll certain demographics of the Democratic Party. So they're pushing these polls. And then another thing that they're doing is that they're using the pundits and the people who obviously agree with the system, the status quo, because it funds them to say, Elizabeth Warren is it, and Elizabeth Warren is that. They're completely disregarding the fact that Bernie Sanders has 1 million plus volunteers, that he has completely outraised everybody, including Donald Trump, in the third quarter, something that has never been done until now, and that he has an entire movement. Elizabeth likes to call her movement grassroots when it's anything but. Yeah. And so they completely smear him. They focus on his heart attack, on that. Bill Clinton and Bush had the same thing, the stent, way before Bernie has had it. I mean, they just use everything they can. They use the identity politics of the Bernie bros being, sexist and racist because they're not lining up behind a woman. I mean, they just use everything that they can to make it seem like he doesn't have a shot. But when you look at the rallies this man has, when you look at the fundraising, the numbers, I mean, it is obvious that he's leading, but they're never going to show that.
Yeah. And Elizabeth Warren's being coddled. She's being coddled by the mainstream media. She's being coddled by the New York Times. And the reason why they hate Tulsi, one of your people just asked, is because they are pro-war. The New York Times lied us into Iraq. Right. They're pro-war. Same with the Washington Post, which has a multi-billion-dollar deal with the CIA to push their propaganda. CNN, and if you watch those debates, you'll see that they allowed Elizabeth Warren to be attacked from the right, making her look good, and she pretty much fended herself off. Somebody asked me, how did Elizabeth Warren do in the debates? I said she did pretty good because she was able to stave off the attacks from the right. But the problem is when she was attacked from the left on foreign policy, where she's awful from Tulsi Gabbard, they immediately go to a commercial break. So
she also didn't say anything about, remember when I think it was either Buttigieg or Klobuchar who asked her about how you're gonna pay for it. Like Bernie's pretty honest about how the payment for these programs are going to come, whether you like his ideas or whether you don't like his ideas. At least he offers them quite clearly, right? But Warren just ran around that question all night. She ran around that question all night, that we'll take care, we'll do this, we'll do that. And eventually the candidate had to come out and say that, look, you've been telling us that you have a plan for everything, but you're not telling us how those plans are going to be funded.
Exactly.
I feel that was a little sneaky too, right?
Exactly, because she can't, because she needs to leave enough room for her to be funded by the people that aren't progressive, that the corporations. So Pasta did mention quickly, like that she funneled money from her Senate campaign into her presidential campaign. That way she could say, I'm not taking this the corporate money for the primary. But she knew she was going to run by then. She knew, and she was courting these big money millionaires in these PACs, and she knew that she was going to be able to do that. Another thing she did was she used some PACs to also with different names and these maneuverings to make it look like she's not taking money directly from certain people, but really she is. And so she also said she's open to doing it in the general. So again, she's really not who she says she is. She needs to say just enough progressive, superficial things to get on the good side, but not too much to where she can't backtrack. She called Medicare for All now a framework, and she said we need access to affordable healthcare, which is talking points to the insurance companies, because her daughter was extremely connected to the insurance companies. Right. There's so much there. It is crazy.
Yeah, we see her daughter making contributions to the Working People's Party, and then all of a sudden the Families Party, which endorsed Bernie last time, but for some reason they endorsed Elizabeth Warren this time.
Yeah,
I don't know, maybe because they got $45,000 from her daughter. Right. You know what I'm saying? That's what we do. We always follow the money, and not to mention, Sham, that Elizabeth Warren is awful. Terrible on foreign policy. For the most part, all the Democrats are terrible on foreign policy.
Right.
Bernie's got some chops. There are some areas of concern, of course, as well. But Tulsi's the only person on that stage that has an idea, a lick of how to be the commander of chief from day one when it comes to foreign policy. And that's also a big, huge issue that we have in the States. A lot of our people on the left, our friends on the left, I know I get in trouble. I call them social justice warriors, because they're out in the streets. They're fighting there, and they're fighting for truth and justice and what they believe is to be right. But they don't know anything about foreign policy, and it really is bothering.
Or economics. They don't back the social justice issues with economics, right? Social justice without economic justice is not really justice.
Not justice. So.
Yeah, it is interesting. Let's come to the debates and how you think people perform. I mean, Warren clearly got the most amount of speaking time, or whatever you want to make of that, right? She got the most amount of speaking time. But other than Warren, who I think Bernie had a good performance. I think Bernie had a really good performance. Like a lot of people came out and they were like, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah.
No, we can hear you good. I'm so sorry. I was just
no, you're good. You're good. No, so I thought Bernie had a good performance. A lot of people were talking, asking questions about his fitness and is he going to be able to go on. I think he did pretty well. I think Buttigieg had a visible performance. I wouldn't call that necessarily a great performance, because I think his disagreement with Tulsi on the whole foreign policy issue, his point was quite silly, and I'm surprised not a lot of people in the media are talking about what he said at all. Like, if you noticed, everybody's saying, "Oh, what a great moment that was," but was it really? Like, I thought that was a very silly answer.
Yeah, it was bad. Buttigieg did bad when it came to this whole situation. I want to kind of point that out. And he's also been part of that whole, like, hey, let's not attack each other. So, I mean, outside the leftist bubble, I don't think that Buttigieg did anything positive for himself whatsoever. But the candidate that I thought had the biggest jump, and Bernie looked better than he's ever looked. He looked healthy. He was cracking jokes. I was really happy. I think he had some hot tea and lemon. The voice was good. But for me, it was all about Andrew Yang. I thought Andrew Yang had the best performance he's ever had in any of these debates. Once again, I don't agree with a lot of his policies, but it's good to talk about a UBI. A UBI will work if there's other policies that go along with it, and it won't work by itself. And Andrew Yang is off on those policies, but the way he got the audience involved, the way he made his jokes, the way he connected, the way he talked, I thought for himself, Andrew Yang made the biggest jump and helped himself.
Yeah, I thought Andrew Yang did well. I mean, like I said, I don't agree with his policies, a lot of them either, but I think he's at least presenting new ideas that haven't been presented before. He made some good points as to automation and what that's causing. It's already happening. And I thought that was probably his best performance personally for himself. I also thought that was hands down Bernie's best night ever in any of these debates. I thought he looked reinvigorated and refreshed. But more importantly, he was able to cement himself as the class populist candidate for the United States. I mean, he's great on domestic policy, hands down. He knew the best answers on Medicare for all. He knew how to separate himself from all the corporatists who were still dodging the questions. He attacked the billionaires of the in America, basically for being greedy, and he didn't have any sort of. He didn't hold back this time. He was completely going after them. He also was able to generate so much applause from people that may have disagreed with him. And he is the kind of a politician that really is not this sort of polished guy. And that's, I think, what people love about him is that he's not he's unpolished, he's unfiltered, and he's able to say these things. And he was able to make himself look like the guy that everybody was stealing the ideas from, that keep everything that they talked about, Medicare for all the economic issues, all of that wouldn't be even debated if it wasn't for Bernie Sanders' run in 2015. So I think that when everything revolves around you, that makes you the candidate.
And don't get me wrong, I didn't like his answer on Syria at all. I wanted him a better answer.
So I said domestic.
Me and Fiorella might disagree on this one. I didn't like Tulsi or Bernie's answer on impeachment. Once again, I am totally against the impeachment process with what's going on right now. So even though we like these candidates, we're very critical of them times. And if you watch our show, we don't ask Tulsi easy questions. We ask her the hard questions. Yeah. My partner over here was the first to ask her about Kashmir when it was really going to be front and center. You see all her adversaries grab our clips and use it to attack.
Exactly.
But Fiorella and I asked her about China and the NED. So it's like we don't ask her easy questions, but we're not going to always like her answers. We're going to be critical of her. So once again, Bernie could have done better on Syria. He could have done better on impeachment. But across the board, everybody else. And let me tell you something else. Amy Klobuchar has to go. This woman is all over the place. I don't even know what to think about with
Doritos are opiates.
Yeah, she got sponsored by Doritos 3/4 of the way through the debate. You know, we're gonna see her in a Cool Ranch commercial soon.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting debate, and now since the last 48 hours after the debates and the way media has been covering it. Again, how much of for me, from reading whatever media that I read, again, I'm not incredibly well versed on American politics, so I try to read as big of a cross section of media as I can. I feel like that's probably the best idea if you want to understand American politics. And so reading that, it seems to, again, like I said before, it seems to be a foregone conclusion at this point that Warren's probably going to nail the nomination. What sort of a chance do you still reckon Bernie has? And we didn't even talk about the other part, which is, you had AOC, and I think Ilhan Omar also today came out and endorsed Bernie. So do you think that gives him a bit of a push? Do you think that gives him a bit of a boost? And do you think the race is over?
I mean, I think that it's not the media saying that he doesn't have a chance is a complete lie. The only way he doesn't have a chance is if you rig this election. Because if you look at the numbers, if you look at his donations, if you look at his rallies, if you look at the excitement, the movement he has behind him, and you add to that the Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who is the most popular congresswoman right now, and then you add Ilhan Omar, it's almost like this unity is happening on the progressive side, and people are very excited about that. The only way I think would hurt him in the general, I think a lot of people don't like her or Ilhan Omar and on the other side of the country, right? They don't like AOC or Ilhan Omar. And then the general, he might have to, I don't know, figure out how he is going to run, because right now he's running to win the Democratic primary. He's he's running to win like even some of these centrist votes. He has shifted his foreign policy from being very Tulsi-like in 2015 to being a little bit more in line with the status quo, which is something that we don't like at all. But I also see that that is a tactic. That is how he's being advised, and he's trying to really get dissemination, still keeping true to his word of not taking the corporate money, of still pushing the working class issues, economic policies first. I think the idea that he's done or that he doesn't have a shot is false, but I think that you're right. The media is doing this. They're totally saying this because they want people to feel that way. When in 2016, by the time it got to California, by the time we had our primary in June, they had already said that Hillary Clinton won. Yeah. So a lot of people didn't even who weren't even excited to vote. And on top of that, we had obvious issues. I mean, where they gave the wrong ballots to people. They didn't count the ballots. They whited out the ballots. I mean, it just, you could go on and on and on, not just in California and Nevada, New York, across the entire country, Arizona. And so they made it seem like, okay, Hillary Clinton's got this in the bag. You don't need to vote. This is their tactic. This time around, California goes in the second round of Super Tuesday.
We moved it up.
So the first round is going to be New Hampshire, Nevada, and what's the third one? New Hampshire, Nevada,
Iowa's first.
Iowa. That's
New Hampshire section, and then they go for the first. I think it's the first Super Tuesday. We have California has moved up on the schedule and got a lot of
So Iowa, New Hampshire, and they're going to go
South Carolina is in there too. And,
they're going to go first. Yeah. And that's in February, late February. Yeah. After that, it's March 3rd is the California primary, and it's where a lot of states go. So at least we have a chance to, if he wins, if he starts out strong, that's what it's going to be like. But the big question isn't here who the media is pushing and that, because we've seen it in 2016 how they're completely lying, and the polls that showed Hillary Clinton beating Trump were also false, obviously. And so the question is, what do we do to change the corruption in the Democratic National Convention and the DNC and how they've acted on? Because if we remember last time around, Tulsi stepped down and endorsed Bernie Sanders. She was the vice chair, well on her way to being the chair, and she stepped down and endorsed him. And after that, she was blacklisted. What are we doing to change that? What are we doing to anticipate the rigging, anticipate what's already inevitably going to happen? They're already rigging it in a way by pushing this idea that Elizabeth Warren's winning, that she's the chosen one. That's part of the whole mentality of rigging an election. So the question is, what are we going to do?
The mainstream media is part of the rigging process and what they do. They're all owned by the elites anyways. Can I curse on your show or no?
Of course you can.
Okay. My daddy used to tell me sometimes you got to take shit and turn it into ice cream. And that's what I'm hoping to do here, is take shit and turn it into ice cream. Meaning that the fact that the Democratic Party has never addressed the situation about election integrity. Okay, we have something called open source versus closed source, because we have all these machines. Well, 90% of the machines across the country are closed source, meaning there's intellectual property within these machines that we, the public, can't look into it. They're not open source. Even in California, they're touting this open source, but yet they haven't released the code, and there is still some intellectual property within the machine. So I am not convinced that we're going to have a fair primary. I am not convinced that Bernie Sanders is going to be able to win and beat the cheating. So when I talk about turning shit into ice cream, I'm hoping what could have been done in 2016 happens now. And that's, we go bye-bye Democratic Party, and we start a third party. Bernie, Tulsi, all these people come on over. We pull a lot of libertarians over. We pull a lot of independents in, because that's what Tulsi Gabbard is doing right now. When my partner Fiorella said that Bernie Sanders is running to run a primary, she's 100% right. Tulsi Gabbard's running to win the election. So she's talking to a bunch of other people that Bernie Sanders will never get, simply because he has the label of a democratic socialist. So, I mean, Tulsi's bringing this force with her that eventually in the democratic process, the DNC process, she can hand over those delegates, and those are delegates that Bernie Sanders would have never gotten. However, the cheating is involved and still in my mind, and I'm not convinced that we're going to have a fair primary. So my hope is that if they do cheat him again, it's third party time. Because that's what I want more than ever. And he had the opportunity to do it in 2016. He didn't take it. He chose to work within the party. And, you know, that's his decision.
That's why he's running again, too.
That's his decision, and I respect him for his decision. But I am hoping more than anything, we need more of what Europe has. We need more parties.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Wow. That is going to be interesting if there is a third party, because that's, I wonder how that's going to work out. But The other thing that you guys just alluded to, and I read something that was being tossed around Twitter like a little bit of a conspiracy theory. They were like, well, you know what? The DNC kind of decided that we're gonna chuck, and I know chuck's probably not the best word, but that's what the those little Twitter conspiracy theories were saying. And we're gonna chuck AOC and Ilhan Omar on Bernie. So, and like you said yourself, Fiorella, that there's a significant chunk of the country that does not look at them favorably at all.
Right.
So their association with Bernie is probably going to hurt Bernie and is probably going to make Elizabeth Warren look like the wonderful centrist that she is. And it's going to help her rise through the ranks a little bit better and get that nomination. What do you make of that conspiracy theory?
I mean, I don't think it's a conspiracy theory. I mean, I think it's reality. I mean, I think that they want Elizabeth Warren to be the centrist, like the one that unites people. This idea, though, that centrism is the key is false. If we look at the world scheme, like the world right now, we're seeing populist movements win, or we're seeing the more right-wing populist movements win. You're seeing one or the other. You're not seeing people in the center win. You're not seeing what's his name in France. You're seeing the rise of the yellow vest. Right. You're seeing the Haitians revolt. You're seeing the people in Ecuador, Bolsonaro, like how he won, and how how the United States helped take out Lula. And you're seeing it's one or the other. Centrism is actually a dying breed. And so they're trying to convince people that it's the way to go. But the fact is that Elizabeth Warren was a Republican until she was 47 years old. When Bernie Sanders was out there advocating for LGBTQ rights and advocating for, workers' rights, she was advocating for conservatism, for economic policies that were very conservative. And so she's not really even a centrist, and they want to sell you the idea that we need some sort of moderate to bring people together. The closest thing to a candidate bringing people together is Tulsi Gabbard, because she's the one that's talking to both sides of the aisle. She's the one that's like listening to people, even people she doesn't agree with, and she's getting smeared for it. So if the entire establishment really wanted the centrism and moderatism to win, they would be like, oh, okay, Tulsi Gabbard. They would be praising her up. They would be like, okay, she can unite the country. That's not what they want. They want to continue the oligarchy of these politicians and neocons waging war. They want to continue taking that corporate money. They want lobbyists to continue being in power, buying off politicians, which is money in politics, which is something that both Tulsi and Bernie don't want. And so it's this idea that, that's the reality is entirely false. I think we also need to look at how we move forward, like what Pasta was talking about third party wise. I think the way that could happen is Bernie and Tulsi have to make a choice. If the election is clearly rigged again, are they going to accept that and just support the Democratic nominee because we need to defeat Donald Trump? Or are they going to say, you know what, this whole system is wrong. We need to start a new party? Because Pasta's right. We have several factions. So this is why Democrats are so divided, because they should be maybe like 3 or 4 parties. They're not all in agreement because they're not supposed to be one giant monolith.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny. The reason why I was smiling, Sham, is that question is before we did our live stream today, Fiorella was just sitting here with arms crossed thinking. And I'm like, what's up, Fee? And she goes, something's going on with this whole endorsement thing. I smell something. This isn't right here. Yeah. So when you asked that question and you gave your opinion, it was kind of like, wow. And, and I've been really upset with AOC lately. Her stances on foreign policy have been terrible. And her lifting up people like Adam Schiff, who I cannot stand, who I believe is 100% a CIA asset. I don't care if you label me a conspiracy theory or not. Now, this guy has been out in front of every single friggin' war, whether it be Syria, Libya. They couldn't bomb quick enough in Libya for Adam Schiff. He was on Al Jazeera talking about it. So, for me, when I heard that AOC was going to possibly endorse, I was kind of happy. I'm like, okay, at least she's doing the right thing. She's getting back in my good graces. But once again, smelling something around here, it's like, wait a second, what's going on? And like I said, a lot of people don't like them right now, especially from the past decisions they've made. And I've been a little bit upset with the squad and disappointed. So I can see that as a thing where a lot of people, a lot of libertarians and independents, they might not like the fact that she's going over there for Bernie, that she's going over to their side. I hear you, But if it really picks him up for the primary, I think it's something he can shake loose if he does win.
Yeah,
down the road.
I mean, I think it can help him, but also let's be clear. Like, if Bernie loses, right? If Bernie loses this nomination, Elizabeth Warren wins, they're going to be like, see, like, we can't go two left. We need. This is why Elizabeth won, and then they're going to be like, oh, when she loses to Donald Trump, because she will, Donald Trump will absolutely
no chance.
annihilate her. They're going to be like, see, this is what happens when we give leftist policies a chance. See, they're not. This is what happens. I mean, it doesn't work. We need to get rid of any sort of socialist democracy and all the stuff. So they're going to blame it on the progressives entirely. They're going to use her to say this doesn't work.
She's going to be the progressive candidate, right? That's how she's going to be portrayed.
Yeah. She's not progressive, and she's such a virtue signaling and trying to play the victim and trying to prove so hard that she's Native American when she didn't even show up at Standing Rock, which was one of the biggest protests for Native Americans. Guess who showed up? Tulsi showed up, not Elizabeth Warren. And the day she announced her presidency, her run for presidency, she took the bait from Donald Trump and took a test to prove that she was 120th Native American, and she's also done stupid things like saying she won't go on Fox. She's the biggest virtue signaler out there, and most of the Democrats try to play these candidates on stage. They always try to play the victim role and try to get you to compare yourself to them and say, well, I'm going to fight for you because I'm a victim just like you. Cory Booker's no victim, man. You know what I'm saying? He grew up in the richest area in New Jersey, and he keeps on saying my neighborhood and my neighborhood. And Kamala Harris with the same thing, like I was a little girl, bust to school. It's like, shut up, ladies and gentlemen.
It is good. I think it is going to be very interesting. Let me just finally ask you guys, how do you think a third party will work? Like, if a third party does get created, how is that? Because I feel like, do you think, at least for the foreseeable future, let's say after this election, or after this primary, whatever, a third party is floated by Bernie and Tulsi, do you think that's going to disadvantage the Democratic Party and give the Republican Party an advantage, at least for the foreseeable future? Or do you think it cuts into the Republican Party too?
Not if it's done right. Listen, the coalition has to be between two groups. Anti-interventionists, libertarian independents, okay? People who don't want to go out, if they have a nationalistic approach or whatever, if they don't want to be, going over to other countries bombing and wasting money, that's part of the coalition. But the second part of the coalition, which is the Bernie Sanders coalition of workers, because no matter what, whether we're black, we're white, you're Hindu, I'm Muslim, I'm Catholic, we all have to work in America. And that is the biggest coalition right there. So if we grab that group, we grab a lot of people out of the Republican Party, because the Republican Party has been kind of dismantled itself. Trump was not the typical establishment candidate. He kind of broke the establishment. So it's as fractured as can be. And when it comes to a general election, a lot of people think outside the party lines. You know what I'm saying? They think about what is more beneficial to me. I'm a worker. This third party is a workers' party. Let's go over there. That's just my opinion, fam. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to require all of the people, like the Yang voters, the Mike Rebel people, the Tulsi Gabbard supporters, the Bernie Sanders supporters, to form an alliance and be like, look, we cannot continue to take this binary left versus right BS ideology that is just not working for any of us. And we all have differences, but let's unite, and we can grab some of the libertarians and the Republicans, and then together, it's going to require Americans to do something that they've never done before in recent times, is actually go to the streets the way that the Yellow Vests are doing. It's going to require Americans to go out for the streets, not for social justice issues, but for economic issues, for election integrity, things that they haven't gone to bat for in huge numbers. It's going to require huge numbers. It's going to require them seeing like the actual rigging and being so angry and done with the system. And I think it will hurt the Democratic Party. I think it actually will pretty much destroy, because if we look at the superdelegate process that happened in 2016, it was blatant. I mean, a superdelegate vote counts so much more than a regular delegates and a regular person's vote. They come in and they say, no, we're going to give our vote to Elizabeth Warren this time, let's say. And if they do that against the will of the people, so if the majority of people support Bernie Sanders, and then these super delegates on the second round, because there's so many candidates, go in and they're like, sorry, we're going to vote against the will of the people and do what we want. That's not democracy. You're essentially saying that this country is not a democracy, because it's not. It hasn't been for a while, but you're literally blatantly saying that. And so people are going to have to be like, okay, we cannot do this. I don't care if it's Donald Trump or the devil himself running against Elizabeth Warren, but I'm sorry, but we're going to have to say enough is enough and break away. And I think this election is so pivotal to that. This is the most important election of our times in the United States, and it is do or die at this point.
I'll take 4 more years of Donald Trump if we can build a coalition, a party outside the Democratic and Republican Party that for the future can just be a big old steamroller and really represent the will of the people.
Well, you're going to get 4 more years of Donald Trump anyway. If Elizabeth Warren wins the nomination, you're going to get more. Yeah. So, and then eventually,
those debates are not going to be pretty to watch.
Yeah.
But I know this much: if in fact Bernie Sanders got cheated and he started the third party, him and Tulsi, they're going to get the blame for Donald Trump no matter what. You know what I'm saying? Hey, Bernie Sanders will get the blame for Donald Trump no matter what if he starts the third party.
But I think if elections were fair and if people demanded it, they could actually win. The majority of Americans are independents. The majority of Americans don't even vote because they don't believe in the left or the right. So if the majority of Americans, you give them a reason to finally say, you know what? I'm actually going to participate in the political process because this is it. And at least they're standing up instead of falling in line. Then you can actually win. I think you could actually win and you could fight the system, but it's going to require people to actually get out of their chairs and actually fight the system for real this time, and not just, do a half revolution and just be like, okay, well, Elizabeth Warren's not that bad. Let me just, choose her. You can't give into that. There's no middle ground is one of Bernie's slogans, right? No middle ground. And I believe in that firmly. The minute we start being complacent to these policies of neoliberalism, you're not only going to elect Donald Trump this time, the next time around, you're going to elect somebody worse and worse. You have to look at what got him elected. And it was these type of candidates like Obama that got Donald Trump elected. And then you're just going to keep going back and forth until we don't even have a country or a planet anymore. This is how bad it is getting. So people need to be aware of that.
Hashtag no half-ass revolution.
Hashtag no half-ass revolution. Well, there we go. I know you guys are strapped for time today, but so we'll call it a day here. But I'm happy to come to your guys' show sometime, and we can probably discuss a little bit of foreign policy, a little bit of India, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit more than we got a chance to do today. But again, guys, thanks a ton for coming on. Thanks a ton for talking to me about the debates. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having us on, Sham. We've been wanting to be on your show for a while, and we look forward to hopefully next week you coming on this show and talking some stuff with us, because we need some educating on what's going on over there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having us on. And I just want to say, there's a lot of misinformation being spread. Just Americans giving their own opinions on issues that they don't know that's going on in India. And it's really frustrating. So I'd be really happy to have you, kind of shed some light on those things that Americans like to talk about, but they have really no idea as to what's going on. Americans are the most self-centered people that you probably know far more about our issues than the average American knows about India's issues. So that's the reality. And that's why we're trying to reach out and have as many people, on as possible.
There's so many people out here talking about Indian politics and they're not even from India. Please. Sorry.
Yeah. No, I think that's very cool. I'll be more than happy to do that. I'll be more than happy to have a chat with you guys. All right, guys, if you want to check out Convo Couch, I'll leave the information in the description of this video right here. So go check those channel out. Go watch some of their videos. It'll be really fun. And we're gonna figure out some time for next week where I'm gonna go on their show and have a chat with those guys over there. So come and watch us there too. Other than that, if you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe, make sure to like, make sure to comment, do all that fun stuff. And I'll see you guys next time. Till then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys soon.
Bye.